what they did. Well, anyway, when we step back and we might think of them as heroes or some of them as traitors, this has been the tendency. It's divided the left. Were you, as you said before, were you for Stalin or Trotsky? Later, the division between the Soviet Union and China was also largely around personalities, Mao and Khrushchev, not a historical materialist analysis. So let's just talk about the methodology that you used in the presentation here of an event that, while it's 30 years old, there's still a lot that we might need to know about it that we can't yet know about it. In other words, it's a fairly recent and major event in history.
Yeah, that's right. And you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the need to situate the October Revolution and this process of construction of socialism in the Soviet Union historically and geopolitically. And you know, we talk about the personalization of the revolution and the focus on figures like Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, etc. One particularly alarming trend among October Revolution historiography these days, and I think we need to really counter, is this idea that the October Revolution was a sort of coup. It came out of nowhere, and it was just a matter of blunt force and the personality of, this aggressive personality of Vladimir Lenin. The idea that Lenin and Bolsheviks sort of opportunistically grabbed the reins in a power vacuum and imposed their rule through sheer force of arms, when nothing could be further from the truth. And I think that's a really essential thing for people to understand about the October Revolution. It was a popular revolution that met specific demands of the population at that time. It was overthrowing what was a thoroughly discredited provisional government, a bourgeois government that had lost the support of the population, that had lost the support of the working class, that had lost the support of the peasants, that had put the brakes on a revolutionary process that feared more than anything the idea of the workers and peasants taking control and making it a really democratic revolution. This was a government, a provisional government that was unwilling to pursue peace. If there was any number one demand of the Russian people at that time, it was to get out of World War I. It was to stop engaging in this imperialist war and to break Russia's ties with English imperialism, with French imperialism. And ultimately, it was Lenin, it was the Bolsheviks who were ready and willing to struggle for these demands of the masses, to turn their slogan, that famous slogan of peace, land, and bread, into reality. All of those three, peace, land, and bread, they were all indispensable. And it was the Bolsheviks that was the political force that was fighting for all of them, to get Russia out of the war, to distribute land to the people, to resolve the food crisis. And that's the basic historical drive, the basic historical motive of the October Revolution, and we shouldn't allow this history to be personalized, or for the revolution to be labeled as a coup, a sort of random one-off event that came from nowhere.
Yeah, there's so many different factors when we look at the year 1917 that are detonators for the revolution. And the revolution keeps going through different stages and phases. When Lenin comes back to Russia at the end of March, early April, depending on what calendar we're using, and there's basically a euphoria. The Tsar has just been overthrown, the monarch, there's a new government, the Provisional government, and it's filled with revolutionary optimism. The revolutions happen rarely in history, very rare, and it's like a celebration of the oppressed. And they're like, the new day has arrived. And Lenin comes back and says, well, this is only the beginning. We've completed one stage of the revolution, and he issues a speech to the Bolsheviks and then to the Mensheviks and then really to all of the different tendencies, which is known historically as the April thesis, where he says, we're going to go forward and no support for this government because it's still in alliance with Britain and France, meaning that the war will continue and the people want the war to end. The soldiers, who are mainly peasants, want to come back and farm. They're going hungry. Their families are starving. They don't want to keep fighting. Already, like, millions have died. And Lenin says, look, we're going to take another step. No support for this government. We're going to basically topple the government. But he says, not now. He says, not now. In fact, our main tactic now is to persistently and patiently explain to the workers and to the peasants why the government that they so euphorically embrace at that moment isn't going to be able to do the job. And he says we can't jump ahead of the process. The reason I'm mentioning this is your point. There was no coup. This was not Lenin coming in opportunistically, like having like a night raid on the Winter Palace and suddenly taking the reins of power. It's a long, protracted process that goes through what's called the June days and then the July days, and then the right wing attempts to overthrow this weak sort of bourgeois government that's in August with the Kornilov counteroffensive, the counteroffensive of the Tsarist generals. And at each and every stage, Lenin and the Bolsheviks are navigating through these troubled, complicated waters. And at the end of the process, only at the end, by mid or late September, do they have the majority of the Soviets, which are councils of workers or soldiers or peasants. Let's just talk about, I want to just examine this again, what 1917 really was, because again, revolutions are so rare.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've put it well. In February 1917, you have what's called the February Revolution, which finally, after a long protracted struggle, gets rid of Tsarist rule and replaces Tsarist rule with a provisional government, which is essentially led by the capitalist class, by the bourgeoisie, by Kerensky, by the Kadets. And the story of February to October 1917, which is, in any reasonable sense, a very short period of time. It's 9 months. In our terms of political organizing, you organize in the United States, I organize in Britain. 9 months is nothing. But in a revolutionary situation, a hell of a lot can happen in 9 months. And really, the content of that period is this process of the Bolsheviks putting forward their strategy, ruthlessly and relentlessly exposing the limitations and the renegacy of the provisional government, which, as you said, it's not pulling out of the war. It's not bringing the peasants home from the front. It's not nationalizing the land. It's not expropriating the exploiters, the capitalists. So the Bolsheviks are doing the hard work. They're propagandizing at the front among the soldiers. They're propagandizing in the factories. They're winning the support of the workers, the soldiers, the poor peasants for the continuation and the deepening of the revolutionary process, for the construction of socialism. And they put forward a concrete program of withdrawing Russia from the war, nationalizing the land, expropriating the capitalists. And over the course of time, this program won widespread support, and that's why the revolution took place in October. And it's also why the revolution was able to survive. That wasn't a fluke. That they can take power and they can hold power in spite of a civil war, a war of intervention, the invading armies of 14 countries coming and trying to kill the revolution in its cradle. The October Revolution survived, and it could only survive because its program and its activities had won the very broad support of the masses of the people.